Hello and welcome back to another very sunny episode of the Sesh. Summer has come back around again at last, and we've got something, or rather two things, a little bit different for you today. First is no beer, it's cider, which we've done in the past, but never quite this many, or I'm hoping never some quite this good. And second difference, this one's a bit of a preview, because two of these aren't even released. We have been very kindly provided some samples by the Scoundrels and Rogues cider company up in North Canterbury to bring them to you so that you can have a sneak peek of what's coming and see what you think. Righty, let's get into it and we'll give you a little bit more on it. Let's start with the oldest one first. This was never actually released for sale, it was just for friends and family of the Scoundrels. So, ooh, dearie me, it's well carbonated.
Vigorous.
And now, cider has always been a part of the New Zealand brewing scene, but it's only really taken off and exploded, so to speak, in the last decade or so, when some of the major breweries started to dip their toes in the pool, have a bit of an experiment. And since then, it's grown by leaps and bounds, styles becoming more authentic, closer to the older English model, also branching out into some of the more fruit wine-influenced recordedly style cider, which we won't be covering here. We're looking at the authentic
No, just the
apples, water, yeast kind
the
of cider.
real stuff. And I think I'm a bit of a lapsed cider drinker myself. The last time I really had was in the cider game, so to speak, was back in university when I probably drank a lot of Scrumpy.
Might be a different game.
Presumably enjoyed it. So what's happened to cider in the last sort of 8 years, which is quite a long time for the rise of craft brewing, really. You could probably document most of craft brewing in the last 8 years. I'm kind of ignorant too, so Dave's probably our cider man for this one as to whether this is just how good this is, because I'll be comparing it to something a bit arcane.
To date, there is still nothing wrong with a good Harvest Scrumpy or an Old Moot Scrumpy. Some of the well-established cider brands still produce a really good product. It's really nice. It hasn't changed. It's just stayed good.
Rightio. Anyway,
yeah.
let's get into this one.
Yes.
The bottle says 4.6%. That's wrong. It's more like between 8 and 9, but
Jeez.
never mind. Which is, we should say, what you get when you ferment apples.
lot of sugar in there.
I was told the bricks that you get when you ferment an apple, or rather when you harvest an apple, and if you ferment that dry or close to dry, you should be getting something 8% or a little bit over. So if your cider is less than that, it has been watered down. So, beware. Scrumpy isn't strong cider, it's just cider. Everything else is weak cider. So there you go.
Now this one's been aging in the bottle for 3 years, languishing, biding its time.
Yeah, sitting around, and it's not got sediment or anything like that, is
No,
it?
perfectly clear.
Smelling
Perfectly clear.
it, characteristic, slightly sort of like a warm bruised apple. There's a little smell of that. Yeah, slightly brown flesh.
I'm actually smelling champagne. It's
That's
got a
it
real
too, yeah, very
yeasty,
dry.
yeasty bready bead to it. These, I think, have all been oak aged to a certain extent.
There's
and
a very
oak
light
rested, so,
hint of oak on the back, I think.
and there's a lovely acid tang on it too. Let's see what's on the
Yeah.
palate.
Oh yeah. Acid up front, all the bubbles. This is extremely carbonated.
Very effervescent.
It's very tasty. It's more sweet than I expected though. It's very kind of sweet, dry.
That really is
Yeah.
astonishingly quite sharp and acidic. That's really quite mouth-watering, and it still tastes sweet, so I think there actually is quite a little bit of residual sugar still in here. I have it from the maker that is achieved by brewing it dry until it's completely finished fermentating and there's no yeast left, and then they add just a little bit of freeze concentrated apple juice in there to tweak the sweetness up so that it's a sort of perfect sweetness and not too dry, not too sweet, and no risk of the bottles continuing to ferment and blow up like my cider experiments in the past.
Oh, that's exceptional though. It's crisp, it's bubbly.
And I think,
It's
the
light.
result, it really is pretty good. Okay, moving into the present vintage. The one that's still available, and the only one that's ever been to market, so we'll consider this the benchmark, I suppose. It's the 2013 vintage.
What are we looking at strength-wise on
This one has a slightly more accurate 8.5%.
It's what a regular cider would call a scrumpy, but for Scoundrels and Rogues, it's just half of the course.
A bit less aggressive on the opening.
So this one's looking just a little paler. I thought the other one was just slightly pink. But in all of these, really good concentration. Quite gold compared to most ciders, which probably tells you something about how many apples goes into one versus the other.
Yeah,
This
crystal
one's,
clear.
this one's looking pretty good.
Oh, that's smelling much more dry, much more of a Brit champagne, if I'm using the terminology correctly, but...
Pretty close actually. In the nose at any rate. Yeah, that's got quite a... There's just a hint of bitter apples in here, a bit of crab apple coming through.
Maybe a little bit of spice.
Yeah, tiny bit of maybe cinnamon, apple pie kind of a thing, you'd say. Funnily enough. So let's taste it.
That's a different thing.
Oh, that is really dry. That is scouring my mouth clean of any moisture.
That's quite different. That's quite different. That is a slightly broader palate than the other one. There is a little bit of heat in this one, which wasn't present in the last one. Let me just see again.
There is much less of that oxidised brown apple flavour that you get from what we got from the older cider.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's more barrel on this one or what, but yeah, it's not. I wouldn't call it dry. It's just
I think it
maybe
starts sweet and ends very dry.
it's just got maybe a little more tannin in there. You could describe it as. It's a slightly. There's a slight bitter element to it, which I don't mind at all. That's coming together to bring the full picture around. But definitely a different animal from the first one, which is, I mean, to be expected.
It's still eminently drinkable though. This is really top stuff.
No, definitely more of an alcohol heat going on. And this one, people who didn't really know what acetone smelled like might say this has some acetone character to it, that sort of sweet model glue kind of an effect. As someone who works with acetone, I can say it doesn't really smell like that, but close enough. So that's, yeah, that tastes sort of more serious across the board. I think I prefer the original one, which is a shame because it's abjectly unavailable, but never mind.
Without trying to sound like I'm unduly flattering, they both taste just as good to me, only in different ways. They're both like completely full, honest ciders, but just exploring different avenues of what it means to be cider.
To coin a really, really overused tasting phrase, I'd call this one a little funkier than the last one. There's a bit more apple funk going on in there. It's not quite as crisp or as clean as the first one. But anyway, without holding you up, we will get into the unreleased ones and see where that's going in the future. Okay, well, let's dip in to the very, very soon to be released new edition of the cider. This is from the 2014 Apple Vintage. If apples have vintages, I'm sure they do.
Was it a good year for apples in 2014?
I don't know, probably. Good enough to make cider out of anyway.
Good.
I don't keep up with the Apple Vintage reports, but I'm sure they're online somewhere.
Yep.
You don't play the Apple Futures market?
No, I don't. I hear that's all locked up.
Right.
Enza's just got it down. But anyway,
Yeah.
so as far as differences in what went in the production, they're more or less the same.
8.9.
So this one came out a little bit stronger, so maybe it was a good apple year. Maybe they just got a little bit sweeter. Aside from that, should be a similar animal in terms of production, just 1 year younger.
A little more straw coloured than the last one, I think.
If you say so. My sense of colour isn't quite that defined to make the differentiation. But again, a good healthy gold colour, not that Polaris supermarket cider thing that you often get.
Now, there's been more of those brown apples, like we encountered in the very first pre-unreleased sample. It's more mild on the nose.
It's mild. It's almost muted compared to the past two. There's just sort of a subtle fresh apple skin going on, and it doesn't jump out quite as much as the others. But let's taste it and see.
Yeah,
I think it's a bit less sharp.
it's kind of a midpoint of the previous two.
Wow.
It's halfway in between perfectly.
Yeah.
It's like a well-balanced.
I think that's the zingiest of them all. My my acid buds are telling me this
Got more zazz?
this has got race to it. I'm not sure if more sweetness has been added to balance it out, but this
This
is
just sweeter apples, a different combination of
incredibly,
varieties.
incredibly good, strong, strappy acid on this one.
It's possibly a little bit too sweet for my taste.
Oh wow, yeah.
I prefer something a bit dry personally, but It's still good.
The moment that hits your tongue, it just does a big acid wheelie all the way down the mouth.
It's definitely got stealth
That's
alcohol,
incredible.
though.
So,
Still got that oaky twang on the end.
oh yeah, but it's not too much. It's
No,
nice and subtle.
no.
In fact, if you hadn't told me it was oat, I probably wouldn't have picked it out.
I still can't pick it out.
It's really, really quite nice and discreet. You don't want to see too much oak, especially in something with a really gentle flavour like apples. Boy, yeah, that is easily the liveliest cider I've ever had. That has got some mean acidity to it. Wow, we should have probably chilled that one. But never mind.
I don't know if it's just the cumulative effect or something, but I'm getting a bit more of a white wine thing off this one on the end.
I think they
getting
all
less
are.
of that.
They're somewhere between champagne and Riesling for me. They're very, very winey things, which I think is excellent. But anyway, one to go, and it's the big one, the Imperial. So we will get straight back into that one in a minute. Righty-ho, and it's the last one, it's the big one. It's the Imperial Cider at a full 10.5%. And this one's a wee bit different, aside from that whopping alcohol on it. It's been in a barrel for a full 1.5 years. So that's longer than some wines. Let's see what's going on. This will be by far the strongest cider I have ever tasted. So this one was either made by super duper apples, or it's fermented a little bit of that freeze distilled, or freeze concentrated rather, apple sweetness in there to give it just a little bit more
Looks like
oomph.
a single batch of the 2014 cider was selected and then aged to produce this one.
Evil genius.
I'm smelling more, I think, yeast and more wood on the nose. It could just be me. But
Yeah, I think it's wood.
There's a little oaky twang, and there is quite a breedy yeast there as well. They're all doing this really quite compelling champagne thing, which is marvellous. But anyway, let's get in and see.
Oh, okay, I think the lining of my mouth and tongue has
It warms
dissolved
the
and gone.
cockles of something.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that's got some
Whoa,
real heat now.
it's scouring.
Need to brush my teeth now.
Oh,
But
that's
it's
got
just so sweet and pretty.
it's got heat, and it's got sort of concentration, and getting up as sweet and as strong as it is, this has got some real weight. This has got quite a thickness to it, like a dessert wine has that sweet thickness in
I
the
was
mouth.
thinking a late harvest Riesling. It's also got some oakiness. There's a bit more wood coming through at the end, and like a distinctly oaky aftertaste. But a strong, almost a burningly sweet late harvest
It's
Riesling.
definitely a thicker body.
Yeah.
It's verging on sticky.
I think it's perfectly well sticky. And we're getting into dessert cider territory here. I think that's actually pretty good. I wouldn't want enormous quantities of it, but boy, I think it's probably the best balanced of the lot, because that extra oak is doing quite a lot to dry up the end, and so you're getting quite a ride on the palate. It starts off the sweetest, and it ends up not quite, but one of the driest that we've had, and that's, I think, quite exciting. I like a palate that takes me places, and this one does. Having really been off the cider wagon for a many number of years, this is kind of a wake-up call for me, because I didn't know ciders had improved this much, and secondly, I didn't know cider could be this interesting. I've always seen cider as something you kind of get in a litre bottle in the supermarket and sort of away you go. You know, you get the tape out and
Get it with a bowl,
you know,
bowl of tape.
yeah. And that's how it went. But this isn't the case at all. This is the first time I could have looked at something and say this is craft cider rather than just cider, and that is pretty exciting, really. As for where you'll be able to get these are all distributed by our very local brewer in Christchurch, Two Thumbs, and you can find them on Manchester Street and go straight to the source. Which
Wednesdays and Fridays.
Wednesdays
They're
and
open
Fridays,
3 till
there we go.
6.
That's valuable information. So that's about as close as you'll get to the main distribution, but you'll also find them in a few spots I
Think
know
the beer
of.
library has them?
They should if
Yeah.
they don't. They certainly should if they
get on
don't.
it. Yeah,
You can get
I'm
to
pretty sure it
Maryvale
does.
Fresh Choice, and you can get to, of course, Parklands, the one and only. And Brett will sort you out. They're probably in a few other places, I don't know. But hunt around and you'll probably be rewarded. These 2 new ones will be coming out later in the month or very, very early next month. So have a look for them on shelves then. And in the meantime, nothing wrong with the slightly more vintage one. If there's anything that this tasting has proven, it's that, if anything, cider only gets better when it's this good.
Yep.
So there you go. Stay groovy and have a cider. If you're like me, you won't know what you've been missing out on. Catch you next time. Right? Stand there. I'll do your side on toss. Okay.
Yes. Slightly